Is it legal in the state of Texas to place cameras in the bathroom without consent? Well, the answer is yes. In Spring ISD, a janitor, 9 months ago, in Spring ISD, a janitor is back in court after being charged for putting cameras in a staff bathroom at a school, which goes against Section 2115 of the Texas Penal Code, prohibits photographing or recording in a bathroom without consent. We already know of one instance that happened here in Corpus, where the owner of Wings and More put a camera in the bathroom. And his intention was not to invade privacy, but to protect his business from vandals. Let's give you the full story from Spring ISD all about this, and then later on we're going to do our Give Me a Break fact check. Take a look.
Yeah, prosecutors say Eric Carrion admitted to putting cameras inside 2 faculty bathrooms at Hoyland Elementary School in Spring ISD. They were first discovered on January 2nd. No cameras were discovered in student bathrooms. Now, yesterday, the 41-year-old man made his first court appearance where he learned more details about what happened. The bathrooms that Carrion admitted to installing cameras in were restricted to staff members, according to the district. Investigators say they found recordings of 2 female staff members using the restroom. After the first camera was discovered, the district looked for others but found none. The district immediately fired Carrion once they learned about the allegations. The defense attorney said this is Carrion's first arrest and has no prior convictions. Carrion, who used an interpreter in court, appeared in probable cause court yesterday where the allegations were read aloud.
Invasive visual recording in a bathroom or dressing room. I have looked at the alleged probable cause facts for this case. I do find there's enough probable cause for the case to go forward.
Spring ISD said in a statement that it released it has no tolerance for criminal acts that violate the safety, privacy and well-being of their staff or students. Now, Carrion was issued a $10,000 bond, which he posted. He is scheduled to make a court appearance later today. He is also prohibited, as part of his bond conditions, from being within 500 feet of a school or playground or anywhere where children congregate. We're now reporting live outside the Harris County Criminal Justice Center. Victor Jacobo, KHOU 11 News.
Now it's time for our Give Me a Break fact check. Like we asked before, is it illegal? Is it legal? Is it legal to put cameras in a bathroom without consent? The answer is yes, it is illegal, according to Section 2115 in the Texas Penal Code. All this was updated just almost 9 years ago. Without the other person's consent and with the intent to arouse or gratify the sexual desire of any person. All of this. And it didn't just happen here in Spring ISD, Texas. Before that, it happened at Waynes and More here in Corpus on Staples. Now, this was 5 years ago. And if you were to see that camera today, that could and should, that would set off alarm bells. That would set off bells.
Are some complaints about a camera that is inside a Southside restaurant.
And the camera in question is in the men's restroom in the Wings and More restaurant near Staples and Wooldridge. And we first told you about the camera in 2016. KRES 6 News reporter Greg Chandler joins us in studio. And Greg, I understand photos surfaced that show a new camera was installed.
Paulo, a viewer familiar with our 2016 report believes the camera's field of view has been adjusted. But is a restroom camera even legal? So tonight we're asking, fact or fiction, are businesses allowed to install security cameras in restrooms? That is fiction. State law prohibits taking photos or recording video without consent in restrooms and changing rooms. this picture sent by a viewer makes it look like this camera, recorded by us in 2016, has moved. Wings and More denies that allegation and refused an interview. Back in 2016, owner David Brimhall told us the camera is there to, quote, ensure a wholesome and clean environment and to protect his business from vandals. But is it legal?
The law outlaws recording without a person's consent and with the intent to invade their privacy.
The law is section 2115 of the Texas Penal Code. Paragraph B prohibits photographs or electronic recordings of a bathroom or changing room. There is a sign outside the restroom warning people, but the law says that doesn't mean you consent to being recorded.
And that makes sense, right? Because you could have people who don't see the sign, you could have people who need to go to the restroom and are not consenting but nonetheless are availing themselves of that. And frankly, the bigger issue is we go to a restroom to have privacy.
Consent is part of the law. Intent is the other. In 2016, Brimhall told us his intention isn't to invade privacy, but to protect his business.
Even if there is an intent.
First Assistant DA Matt Manning says that while he can't comment specifically on this camera, he believes a camera in a restroom is an invasion of privacy.
The reality of it is, in a restroom in particular, there are times where you may have something pointed a certain way, but you're nonetheless still able to see certain, parts of the body.
Assistant DA Matt Manning says his office can't pursue this matter unless someone complains to either the DA's office or to the police. CCPD did stop by Wings and More this morning to check the camera out. They went there in response to our questions. Paula?
All right, Greg Chandler.
So you know, Section 2115 of the Texas Penal Code. We'll have a lot to say later. And coming up next, Mark Fu versus the Huge Wave. Actually, two sirs versus the Wave. Part 2 of John Lawson Report, The Ultimate Ride. Stay with us. One thing I do want to point out here is that it's a criminal offense. If you do that, it's a criminal offense which could range to 6 months in jail. Now, there was another instance in Flower Bluff, which we're not going to discuss. That could lead me between me and banned from campus, so we're not going to touch it with the 5-foot pole. But it is a state offense. 6 months in jail and over $1,000 fine. I'm not making this up. It happened. Now, in his case right here, he'll be back in court and he had to spend 6 months in jail and pay that $1,000 and pay that fine. That's what can happen to you. I mean, there should not be any camera in the bathroom. Period. I get you want to protect your business from vandals. I get that, you're suspicious about something. I get it. But state law prohibits you from ever recording in a bathroom. No ifs, ands, buts, or excuses, or exceptions. I understand completely. But the fact of the matter is, you're violating state law. If you want to review that law, feel free.
Studio, and according to the DA's office, recording in a restroom is a state felony, which carries a prison term of 6 months to 2 years. And if there's something that you'd like...
Actually, minimal error. 6 months to 2 years in jail. In the case of the janitor, if it was his first offense, he would have spent 6 months in jail. If it was his second offense, he would have spent 2 years in jail. That's what can happen to you when you record in the bathroom without consent. Now, like I talked about yesterday, in New Hampshire, it is illegal to wiretap. It is illegal to wiretap, which means you have the consent of all parties in order to record audio. Which that would not lead you to be violating the law. It could lead to you being charged for disorderly conduct. The bottom line here is there's no recording in the bathroom, period. That's the whole bottom line here, and I understand completely. You're concerned about something? I understand. Yesterday, I brought you the story of two surfers. Two extraordinary surfers who surfed big waves. Mark Fu and one person who designs boards on the side. Now, it was those two versus one big wave because one forecast was predicted of one storm. Who would it be? The surfers, or that huge wave? You decide. Again, John Larson.
For big wave surfers in Hawaii, last December was a winter of discontent. The surfing was good, but the biggest wave of the decade was reportedly headed not here, but just south of San Francisco to a place called Mavericks.
The place is unusual. It's very ominous. It's very forbidding. Not a pleasant place to go out surfing, but the wave is very good. The wave is very exciting. It just happens to be a lot of rocks. Happens to be in a real bad location.
Bradshaw had surfed Mavericks before and knew the hazards of the location. Boo had never been there, but when he heard how big the wave was, like Bradshaw, he wasn't going to miss it.
These are the kind of swells that happen once every 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
And so we were like obsessed. I was calling, trying to make reservations. I couldn't get a reservation back for Christmas. It was just a nightmare.
Boo finally booked their flights, and together, he and Bradshaw would fly all night long to get to Mavericks, hopefully in time to catch the biggest wave of their careers.
You haven't been back to look at it.
No, it's kind of a spooky feeling just looking at the rocks and the whole setup.
This is Mavericks on a calm day. But this is what Mike Parsons found when he arrived in December. The surf had been huge for days. As always, Boo had called the surfing press. And what you're about to see is what they photographed that fateful week in December. Parsons was among the first on the water.
Parsons' first wave.
Brock Little also made it to Mavericks early. Like Parsons, it was his first time surfing here.
The legends.
And finally, Boo and Bradshaw arrived at the end of the week. But by then, the surf was changing.
We take the mile walk out, turn the corner, and there it is. It's not that big. It's not the wave of a lifetime. No, not at all.
Yeah, I wish it was a little bit bigger, was kind of what we were saying, because it'd been 20 foot earlier in the week, and I'd call this 15 to 18.
But the challenge at Mavericks is not always the size, it's the conditions. With shifting winds, frigid water, and rocks above and below the surface, Mavericks' power is something to contend with. Even the best were taking a pounding.
Oh, he got hurt on that one.
But still, early on, it looked like any other big wave day.
We were going, God, what a beautiful day. The winds were perfect. It was sunny.
Everyone was smiling and happy to be riding big waves.
I even a couple times asked Mark, you having fun? He goes, oh man, I'm having a great time. I'm glad I came.
Boo and Bradshaw were surfing well, clean rides, almost no wipeouts, until they both went after the same wave, and Bradshaw pulled back.
I chose to be a little more conservative, and Mark was trying to hustle the pack a bit.
Boo stole the wave from Bradshaw, but almost as soon as he got it, he wiped out. Parsons and Little grabbed the next wave. Parsons was the first to fall.
I curled on the wave, my nose dipped in, I fell back, and the lip went right through my chest of the wave. I knew I was in for what could be the worst wipeout of my life.
The wave pummeled Parsons so hard, he hit the bottom of the ocean. Little fell next. Powerful whitewater dragged him under. Parsons, underwater now nearly 20 seconds, suddenly felt another body bump into him.
At the time, I thought it was Brock, and I thought, oh my God, our leashes are tangled together, we're banging underwater.
Parsons would later learn it couldn't have been Little. Meanwhile, Bradshaw caught the next wave and unknowingly surfed right over his friends. Moments later, he would hear of their trouble.
Man, be glad you didn't go behind Mark. I said, really? What happened? He goes, man, he ate it. He ate it bad.
And by now, Little was headed into the rocks when his ankle leash hooked around a rock and held him under, with huge waves crashing down on him.
So I'm really trying to get at my leash, but it's far away, and the amount of effort that it's taking me to get to that leash isn't worth it.
And now Parsons was in even bigger trouble.
2 waves, I went without a breath, and then I got a breath, and then 2 more.
Out of air, his leash wrapped around a rock and held him under.
At that time, I basically figured, this is it, I'm drowning. I remember opening my eyes and just seeing black and going, it's over.
Little's leash mercifully broke. The waves threw him over these rocks, and he washed up on a reef without his surfboard.
Now, you're not thinking, this is too heavy.
No, I'm laughing at myself. I'm laughing at myself, going, God, gee, what a day. And it's not even that big, and here I am getting my butt kicked left and right.
And while Little was recovering, Parsons' leash suddenly unhooked, The waves sent him careening through the rocks until he finally washed up near Little, exhausted but alive.
We were both so overwhelmed and like so relieved actually that we had made it. At least I was. I looked at him and said, I've never been through anything like that in my life.
Brock Little, incredibly, would continue surfing that day.
Good to have you still with us.
But he would soon learn everyone was looking for Mark Fu.
Where's Mark? Where's Mark, you know? Did you see Mark when you were paddling in or when you were coming out?
Thought for sure I was dead. I don't know how I lived.
But Parsons was done for the day and thought the crisis was over.
So where's Fu?
I don't know.
Fu broke his board.
What no one knew is that Mark Fu hadn't surfaced. Parsons went back with us to the point where it all happened. He told us as he was headed back to shore, he saw a piece of Fu's surfboard.
So we said, let's turn around and get Mark's board. As we approached his board, we realized that he was still attached to his board. He was floating, still on the surface, face down.
Mark Fu, one of the most experienced, fearless, well-conditioned big wave surfers in the world, lost his life on a 15-foot wave, nowhere near the largest he'd ever ridden. The official cause of death, drowning. His fellow surfers could not believe it.
He just said he died.
It took going there and seeing him to even begin to believe that it could even be real. And I kneeled, I prayed, I held Mark, I held his arm, I grabbed him by the chest and said, why, you know?
I went from really the ultimate high of surviving the incident and the day to the ultimate, to a low that I've never felt before.
In fact, Parsons was so distraught, when the boat reached shore, he raced to telephone his father. The answering machine recorded his call.
Mark Fu is dead. No. I just pulled him out of the water. Oh, that's terrible. No, he didn't stop. I didn't see him. I didn't know. I was right next to him.
As Mike Parsons grieved over the death of his friend, he went on to tell his father how perilously close he had come to losing his own life.
I thought it was over, Dad. Oh, Michael. I just think about you. That's all I can think about. Michael, I'm sorry.
There was no other way this could happen. This was meant to be.
A week after Mark Fu's death, his family and fellow surfers gathered in Hawaii for a memorial service at Waimea Bay.
God wanted Mark so bad that he just disappeared. That's all that happened.
As a final tribute, his friends paddled out in Waimea Bay and scattered Fu's ashes in the ocean.
What do you make of this? I mean, where do you put it in your brain? Tragedy. Tragedy. Sheer tragedy.
It's just so hard to deal with the fact that we were, at that exact moment, that we were feeling so good about life that his life was ending.
Does this whole thing make you pause and say, is it worth it?
Big wave riding?
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. With that, what it makes me pause and think is you can go at any time. You know, big wave riding, crossing the street, whatever it is.
Well, how many friends you had who have been killed crossing the street?
None. How many friends have I had died big wave riding? One. You know what I mean? And it's like on the scale of life, not enough that it really freaks me out.
In fact, within days, all of Fu's friends would be back on the water.
Not bad, huh?
And big wave surfing would enjoy a big wave of publicity. And his friends say that's exactly how Mark Fu would have wanted it.
Mark's death glorified Mark beyond anything he could have done in life. He was already a legend. Now he'd be immortalized for all time as the big wave surfer that died surfing big waves.
But if Mark Fu could have scripted his last ride, his version would have no doubt been different. He would have wanted the wave to be a monster.
It would be a glamorous way to go. I mean, a great way to go. I mean, that's how I would like to go out in a 50-foot wave, you know?
Instead, Fu died on a much smaller wave. A cruel reminder that the ocean never follows a script.
So how did Mark Fu die? The coroner's report found there was no significant trauma to his head, so it appears he was not knocked unconscious. Fu's friends believe that while he was underwater, his leash may have wrapped around a rock like Parsons did, but he wasn't as lucky and probably drowned trying to get to the surface.
So that could even be an explanation. So that can be an explanation about what happened. So you really could mean for service.
Hello and welcome to the.
So you really have an explanation for what goes on. Even if you would. Even if you would, I don't know. Okay. We're gonna take a break. We'll be right back. Do you remember things like saving the rainforest and ending world hunger? Well, nothing quite compares to the star-studded stunts of one animal rights group you're about to meet, which you're about to see. You'll also meet a man who's anti-plastic, anti-cotton, who's anti-wool, anti-cotton, anti-anything. In fact, he will wear vinyl, plastic, and cotton when he convinced celebrities to take it all off for free. Here's Elizabeth Vargas.
Movement is here! It's everywhere, parading in the streets, storming into offices, demonstrating, confronting, all in the name of animal rights. Supermodels are lending their bodies.
I'm Alec Baldwin. Hi, I'm Mike Farrell.
Celebrities are lending their names.
I'm Katie Lang and this is Lulu. If you knew how meat was made, you'd lose your lunch.
It's now a hip cause, a hot trend, thanks largely to the efforts of one man.
It's helping keep the message alive and keep the message in people's faces.
Meet 30-year-old Dan Matthews. He is a man with a message in any language.
Killing innocent animals for a luxury item is despicable. People are outraged. As individuals, we can make a very big statement. Animals aren't here just to serve us. They have families. They feel pain. They feel pleasure. And we have no right to interfere and abuse them.
And he means every animal. Matthews is not just against skinning minks to make fur coats. He's against causing discomfort to any living creature. From the traumatized bee smoked out of its hive for its honey, to the bruised sheep sheared for its wool, to the battered goose plucked for its down.
You are anti-fur,
Yes.
anti-leather,
Yes.
anti-wool, anti-silk.
It's not this simple.
You're anti-down, anti-meat, anti-poultry, anti-dairy products, anti-honey. You're against medical testing using animals.
The thing is that people don't get the proper message, and I think that's a shame.
But why would you be uncomfortable with me simply listing what you are against?
Because it's unfair, because it gives people the idea that we're against it without giving them the reason that we're against it. We have investigated how animals are raised and killed in most industries. Some of it's worse than others, but we find that whenever animals are used by a business, corners are cut and the animals suffer as a result.
We is the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA for short. You've probably heard of them. They're the ones who recruited models to pose naked and made news raiding fur designers' offices.
Of course, the press made quite a big deal out of it, which I
The press made a big deal out of it because you called the press and told them to come along.
Oh yeah, I had no quibbles with the press. I thought they did a great job. Morning. How you doing?
In fact, Matthews admits using the media, and PETA has never had more coverage. That's what's made PETA the new pet cause. PETA now claims a membership of 400,000 and an annual budget of $12 million.
Now, I wanted to ask this Dan one thing.
Just 5 years ago, Matthews was answering phones for PETA. Today, people are calling him.
Dan Matthews, the director of PETA.
As director of PETA's international campaign, this former model and history major from Costa Mesa, California, now travels around the world, fighting for his furry and feathered friends. And while most of PETA's campaigns target fur,
They're just so fascinating.
the staff reaches out to almost every corner of the animal kingdom.
When I look into a chicken's eye, it's just as I was looking into a cow's eyes, or a dog's eyes, or a child's eyes. I see a sensitive individual who is capable of feeling pain and capable of feeling pleasure.
Late night, in a Los Angeles motel, a PETA undercover investigator shows Matthews 13 sick chickens she's bought from a poultry farm.
Their bodies have been altered to grow to massive sizes to get more bird for the buck.
They're turning animals into Frankenstein monsters through genetic breeding and through mutilations which would make most people vomit. PETA's toughest job really is to bring these hideous images to people, not to ruin their day, but to educate them and help alleviate this suffering.
Matthew's love of animals started when he was young. He became a vegetarian at the age of 12 when he went fishing with his father and found the experience cruel.
I just thought, what am I doing invading their world with these nasty hooks?
Now, 18 years later, Matthew says no act of mercy is too extreme.
Is that true? Do you not kill cockroaches?
I bring them outside myself.
You catch a cockroach and free it outside.
Yeah, I never thought it was attractive to squish them up.
Can you understand how somebody listening to you might think, this guy's kind of wacky?
Yeah, used to it. We are not out here to win popularity contests. We're here to make people think. Our methods are very loud. Our methods are very obnoxious. But our methods have been effective. That's why we first got in touch with you.
I was rather more discreet about it, to be honest. But, Dan wants me to do stuff, and I will do that.
Supermodel Naomi Campbell, one of the first to pose for PETA's Naked campaign.
But PETA isn't just against fur, it's against leather and suede and silk. The most prominent out of all of it is fur. Do you eat meat? I eat chicken. Do you wear leather and suede? Yeah.
It's publicity for them.
Karen Handel of the Fur Information Council of America.
These women and the other celebrities that sign on to this misguided notion from PETA, A, they're uneducated about the agenda. B, they're hypocrites in the whole process. And C, they need to have publicity to keep their careers alive.
We're actually undercover in a bunch of circuses right now.
Of course, movie stars and models who can easily earn $10,000 a day may not agree. In fact, they say they're supporting an important cause and doing it for free. But PETA's campaign isn't just glitzy and glamorous. It is gory. PETA distributes this video showing what it claims happens on fur farms and in the wild. It is free to anyone who will take it.
There are foxes who are anally electrocuted. Beavers are often drowned in underwater traps because it's the easiest place to set them near where they live. It's a horror story out there. It's a parade of blood.
I have seen the tape. It's a very disturbing tape. You have to agree that anybody seeing that is going to be bothered.
Well, I think that any time you are talking about the process by which an animal is euthanized, it's not something that people generally want to discuss. But with PETA, that's not the issue. They don't care how the animal is euthanized. They don't want the animal used for anything, period.
We have no hidden agenda. We don't want cleaner cages, we want empty cages.
Carl Lagerfeld, the diner on deck.
What PETA wants, at least for now, or as a first step, is for people to stop wearing fur. And if they can't convert you, they'll try to intimidate you.
You be ashamed of yourself. Reporting torture and death.
Your strategy is to make it so uncomfortable for people who choose to wear fur that they're intimidated into not wearing that coat.
That is a big part of it, yes, absolutely.
That's not freedom of choice.
It's freedom of speech. All this freedom in America, isn't it wonderful?
Seems like you're trying to use it.
Absolutely.
You can't have it both ways, though.
Well, I think we've got it both ways. And PETA certainly pushes the boundaries of those rights. But I think we're certainly staying within the Constitution.
The tactics may be legal, but they can also be offensive.
One of the ads that also got a lot of attention was an ad that you took out in the Milwaukee newspaper after serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested. And in that ad, you detailed the tortures and slaying of Dahmer's victims and then compared that to the slaughter of animals.
It's very disturbing. It's true. What happened to those people is disgusting. What happens to animals is disgusting.
And you're comparing the two. You think there's no difference between what happened to Dahmer's victims and what's happening to animals in slaughterhouses?
They were drugged. They were dragged to their deaths. Their body parts were stored in a freezer to be eaten later. That happens in the meat trade every day, and Jeffrey Dahmer did it to people.
What upsets some of your critics most is your stand against using animals for medical testing.
I would never condone anything be done to an animal that I wouldn't do myself. And when I've learned how animals are burned, scalded, blinded, and mutilated in laboratories.
Animal research had to do with a polio vaccine, tuberculosis treatment, smallpox treatment, arthritis and diabetes treatments. We can do heart bypass surgery now because of animal research.
Yes, but we don't need to do heart bypass surgery if people are educated about how to avoid it in the first place. I think prevention is the real key here.
The fact of the matter is, Dan, you're not a doctor. And doctors who have the education, many of them are saying, we must test these animals in order to find a treatment or a cure.
And many of them aren't. Many of them are not.
Although PETA says it's never destroyed any animal research labs, Dan Matthews admits PETA sends out press releases for the group that has, the Animal Liberation Front, known as the ALF. The FBI is currently investigating terrorist actions by people claiming to be ALF members.
We have acted as the mouthpiece for the ALF upon occasion.
You don't think that's collusion with somebody who's committing an illegal act?
No, not at all. Whenever I hear about animals being taken out of a laboratory and nursed back to health or set free, I get a big smile on my face.
So are his tactics working? Fewer people are buying fur than 10 years ago, but in the past 2 winters, fur sales are up. Fewer designers are using fur, but they say that has nothing to do with PETA. Designer Marc Jacobs still uses fur.
The real reason that I think that a lot of people stopped doing fur is because they thought it was trendier not to do it.
Perhaps that is Matthew's success, that animal rights has become trending. And whether or not people agree with PETA, they are now aware of the issue.
Some of your critics have said, you know what, Dan Matthews is a charismatic, savvy, smart, committed man. Why not use your energy to address homelessness or poverty or some of the social ills in society that are affecting people?
Well, I am your basic bleeding heart. Animals have been ignored for too long, just as women have been ignored, just as blacks and other minorities have been ignored. I see animals as maybe the final frontier of social evolution.
So what does Dan Matthews actually wear if he's anti-leather, anti-wool, and anti-silk? Vinyl, plastic, and cotton.
Vinyl, plastic, and cotton. Está loco, nombre, calón. Your mama's so fat, if she buys a fur coat, the whole species goes extinct. I'm telling you, Dan Matthews, he would have been laughing about being offensive. Hey, Dan, your mama's so fat, if she buys a fur coat, the whole species goes extinct. That's funny, and I'm a little offensive at it too. But it's just a joke, really. It's just a joke. Just because you live in a small town doesn't mean it gets to know the whole story. Except for one person who years ago, because one person you're about to meet, he told, it happened 30 years ago. And John Hockenberry has his story. Stay with us. Now for a story unlike any other. isn't it true that just because you live with family, just because you live with people, doesn't mean they don't know you, even if they are your parents? For one person which you are about to meet, his friend was his father, which he couldn't tell until a horrible secret had happened that caused him to be a family again. Here's John Hockenberry.
48-year-old writer Richard Hoffman is a teacher, a poet, and a father. He is also a victim.
I couldn't bring it home, I couldn't allow it to be part of who I am.
You could forgive Richard Hoffman for wanting to blot out large chunks of his troubled life, the loss of his mother from cancer, his 2 brothers from muscular dystrophy.
I knew that the story that I had to tell was not merely my story.
This is a tragic story of a boy who couldn't forgive himself. Richard had his own terrible secret, a secret he was terrified to tell his parents. They didn't make it easy. Richard says his father beat him, made him want to run and hide. Throughout a childhood full of brutality, Richard kept the secret that he was the victim of a horrible crime, a crime committed by someone close to the family, someone trusted by everyone in the community.
There was a lot of anger, a lot of fury in the house, a lot of rage, as well there might be, at the hand that had been dealt to this family.
A bad hand dealt to the head of the household. Richard's father struggled to survive in the small working-class town of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Every time he thought he'd seen the worst, something else would happen to his family.
If I would have turned my back and walked away from that, God knows what would have happened then.
Did you ever think about it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you think about it. You think, boy, it sure would be nice if I could just pack up here and get the hell out. But you can't.
I think my father made some heroic efforts to convince himself and all of us that we were normal, that this was the way of the world and we were just like all the families on TV.
But Richard knew the worst. With rage at his absent father and rage at the ugly secret he kept inside, Richard outwardly brought home the trophies for his brothers who were too sick to make the sports teams. Trophies to make his father proud. Football and Little League. All of Allentown loved sports. In this community, athletes, and especially their coaches, could do no wrong. Richard Hoffman learned the truth as a 10-year-old child.
Do you remember the first time you met Coach Feifel? It seemed like everybody I knew was playing on that team. Everybody who was a good athlete was playing for his team.
A winning coach, John Feifel, everyone called him Tom. He was tough, with an ironclad power over his boys.
He would wear football spikes, and he'd come and stand on your stomach.
You're a 9-year-old kid with a Korean War veteran Little League coach who's hardening your stomach by standing on it in a pair of football spikes.
Well,
that's America, teaching you how to be tough.
Yeah, well, teaching you what it means to be a man.
Lessons on manhood from a coach who preyed on little boys. It started one day after practice.
Do you remember the first time Coach Feifel showed you a dirty picture? Yeah, it was in his car.
On the way to the ice cream parlor, Feifel showed Richard some pictures of naked women. It was just the beginning.
It was sort of our secret, and it was something he was sharing with me, and you like this. This is pretty cool, isn't it? And then at a certain point, there was no way out.
At Feifel's home, Richard says he was shown more pictures, slides, and pornographic movies. Finally, he turned his brutal attention to Richard's body. And above all, Richard was afraid that someone, worst of all the father he so wanted to please, would discover his secret.
One of the things that happened as a result of Feifel's abuse was that our relationship was ruptured.
A 10-year-old boy raped by his coach became a little boy who thought he had no one to talk to, who thought he was the bad guy.
If you opened your mouth with your secret, what would the effect of that have been? I would be seen for the horrible young pervert that I had now become.
And that is how he would think of himself for the next 30 years. No one learned Richard's secret, but people in Allentown had always whispered about Coach Feifel. Even Richard's father, himself a Little League coach, had heard the rumors and said nothing.
You would say, that guy likes to fool around with little boys. But when you said fool around, you didn't mean actual sexual overtures. You meant maybe he likes to have 6 or 8 of them in the car so he can tell them dirty jokes and stuff. It didn't register that people would be that nasty to children.
And he had no idea that this coach would rape his son. But a few people in Allentown knew that while Richard Hoffman was still in high school, Coach Feifel was actually arrested for sodomizing another young boy.
June 16, 1967. Mr. Feifel at that time is 37 years of age.
Jerry Prokanin is a police detective. His first encounter with John Feifel was no rumor. It was a matter of public record.
Mr. Feifel was charged with sodomy under the old Pennsylvania Crimes Code. The family then declined, after the arrest, to have their son testify.
But without the victim's testimony, a quiet deal was cut back in '67. As Prokanin explains, Feifel was allowed a lesser plea of disorderly conduct, so the charge of sodomy was dropped, the truth along with it.
When you pay a fine of disorderly conduct in Pennsylvania, like in many other states, you can go home and tell people that you had an argument with your neighbor. That's why you were arrested. And it's the end of the story.
Whatever the legal excuse, Coach Feifel was permitted to return to coaching despite his arrest for sodomizing a child. And not surprisingly, it happened again.
I arrested Mr. Feifel back in December of 1983. And it was for involuntary sexual deviant intercourse.
That's right, John Feifel was arrested again, 16 years later, for the same crime by the same detective.
Mr. Feifel got 18 months probation.
Probation because he was regarded by the courts as a first-time offender. Remember, the earlier charge was for disorderly conduct. And while the court should have been able to review his file containing the sodomy charge, incredibly, those files had been destroyed.
The cases from the early 60s, because of space limitations, were shredded.
During the 18 months he was on probation, Feifel's record remained a secret. His victims weren't talking, and the authorities' hands were legally tied. Feifel's seemingly quiet suburban life continued on, without interruption. When probation was up, it was as if nothing had ever happened.
He had a record, but he was a free man.
The secret had been erased except from the scarred minds and hearts of Coach Feifel's victims. By this time, Richard Hoffman was a man in his 30s. He had carried the scars of his rape through high school, then college, through the death of his brother Mike in 1970 and brother Bob just 2 years later. He struggled to escape the ugly person he was convinced he had become.
I would be anybody but that kid. That was the task, was to be anybody but him.
Because that kid was weak? Powerless?
Because he was weak, he was powerless, because he was ashamed. I mean, he couldn't look anybody in the eye.
How lost did you get?
Well, I got very lost. I got very lost.
Drinking?
Sure, the drinking was it's almost too simplified to say it was a way to hold the feelings at bay.
But to finally confront his demons, Richard would unleash all of his feelings. In a meeting in 1990, Richard, the angry, bitter son, gave his father one last burden to carry.
Well, to be truthful, I thought my world came to an end.
In a face-to-face confrontation, Richard told his most painful stories. His father, for the first time, really listened.
He asked me whether I recalled some of the physical incidents between him and I as he was growing up.
But beyond all the family strife and childhood rage, there was the rape. Now his father would know the truth, and it made a much-feared dad tender.
I said, why didn't you come to me when it happened? And Dick's reaction was, all you would have done was beat me up.
For Richard, it was the end of a long struggle. For his father, it was just the beginning. Richard had closure. He had told his secret. He would now write it down in a memoir. But Richard's father was determined to set things right. And to do so, father and son together would take on an entire community.
There wasn't much I could do except to try to check it a little bit to actually see, whether anybody else had the same story that Dick had.
Okay. 2 people versus 1 community and 1 coach. Who would believe those 2? The conclusion to the story when we return. Stay with us. And now the conclusion to our story. Richard Feifel told his father what had happened years ago between... Richard Hoffman told his father what had happened years ago when Coach John Feifel sexually abused him. Physically. Remember, the earlier charges was for disorderly conduct. And while the court should have pulled that file in the case, those were destroyed because of space limitations. Now it's father and son going against one town. Who would believe the incident happened with John Feifel and Richard Hoffman? Again, John Hockenberry.
I believe in the power of books to change people. I believe in the power of writing to change people.
Like any author, Richard Hoffman hoped his first book, a memoir called Half the House, would reach people. But the person he most wanted to reach was his father.
You liked it? Yeah, I liked the book. I did. And I took a big load off of his mind because he thought I was going to jump all over him. But I think it's a truthful book, and you can't fight very much with the truth.
The Truth was a bombshell in Allentown. Hoffman's book named the man everyone called Coach Tom, John Feifel, as his abuser. And now armed with his son's memoir, Richard Hoffman's father was determined to settle a score with the man who had hurt his boy so very long ago.
I just couldn't picture Dick had carried this secret with him for 30 or 40 years. Was he going to carry that, for the rest of his life? Or were there people out there who were going to step forward and say yes?
What father and son discovered was that Richard was not alone. Within a few weeks of the publication of Half the House, the calls started coming in.
Many of those calls were tearful. Sometimes it was 2 or 3 minutes before I got a chance to say anything.
Dozens of men, seemingly of all ages, all victims of Coach Feifel, coming forward now because of a book.
Children just came out of the woodwork to accuse him of these things.
But the most shocking part to both father and son was what neither of them could have imagined. That 40 years after Richard's abuse, John Feifel was still coaching and still abusing children in Allentown.
He said he'd never hurt us, but he did hurt us.
13-year-old Michael, molested by Feifel, would blow the whistle on this man, telling his story to the police. Michael also called Richard Hoffman. Richard remembers their first phone conversation. There were few words.
He said, "Thanks." I said, "Okay." He said, "No, I mean, thanks for writing that book. You made it stop."
That book changed your life, didn't it?
Yeah.
How?
It made me come out and tell the truth what happened.
A book made you brave.
Yeah.
It was as though a 40-year-old story was coming alive before its author's eyes. Richard Hoffman heard from a 12-year-old the same secret he had kept for most of his life. But this time, the ending would be different. Less than 2 months after the publication of Richard Hoffman's book, police arrested a frail 68-year-old man. Astonishingly, it was the same officer who had arrested Coach Feifel twice before who took him in.
I indicated to him that it would be in his best interest that perhaps if there were other boys that he cared to tell me about, that now would be the time to do so.
Feifel confessed to everything. Inside his suburban home, police seized a museum of pornography. There were dozens and dozens of pictures, all of young boys. A startling portrait of a longtime pedophile through the pictures of his hidden victims. But why had it taken 40 years to learn the truth?
A lot of times, if someone does know with pedophiles, it's like, let someone else go to the cops and tell them, I don't want to be the person. Let someone else. It's the proverbial, I really don't want to get involved syndrome.
A small town with a big secret. Even though there were people who knew all about John Feifel, Coach Tom, everybody called him, no one spoke out. So when he showed up here at the prestigious Mountainville Sports Association, once again the coach was brought on board. No background checks, not even a phone call.
Could someone make a call just to say, did you ever hear of a guy by the name of John Feifel? That would have set off 1,000 bells.
There are people who are threatened, very threatened by the revelations in the book. There are people who knew about this and did nothing. There are people who may have been actively complicit with this man, and they have to be damned nervous now about what else will come out.
It all came down to 2 days in an Allentown courtroom. In the end, hundreds of people, mostly young boys, were prepared to testify against Coach Feifel. Richard couldn't tell the court what had happened to him. He was violated so long ago that the statute of limitations had run out. But for the first time in 30 years, he would be in the same room as the man who had raped him.
I was angry. I was really angry. I found myself shaken. I was in tears.
While the whole town awaited Feifel's sentence, Richard and his father understood they had come to the end of a long journey, one they had made together.
If he hadn't hung in with this, there'd be no story.
I have nothing but admiration for the way that Dick did it. I've got something to live for.
You feel like a father again?
Yeah.
Good feeling.
Sure is.
John Feifel was finally sentenced to 8 to 35 years in state prison. Richard Hoffman is now working on a second book, but he knows nothing can ever equal that first slim volume that changed so many lives.
To people who aren't writers, who don't know much about what it takes, would you rather have the Pulitzer Prize or that sentence?
All I have to do is look at one of those kids and the Pulitzer Prize shrinks pretty rapidly. For some of those boys, this stopped because the book was published and because I stuck to my guns about naming him in the book. That's wonderful.
8 to 35 means that Feifel must serve a minimum of 8 years behind bars, meaning he'd be 75 years old before he'll be eligible for parole.
We first played you this story there at the new year, and since then nothing has happened. I mean, if you're one of the victims of John Feifel, you're welcome to tell the story. But the thing is, just come out of the blue. So, I mean, even though you set your reputation, just come out and say, hey, you know, it happened to me years ago, and they'll help you out here. You come forward with your story, then maybe they'll help you out here. We'll be right back. Cell phones dancing. Cell phones singing. M&M's dancing. A little bit, if you watch commercials, you might realize what's the magic behind this. Until you see this March Madness commercial, you might be suckered into seeing March Madness dropping the ball. Here's Chris Hansen with tonight's Dateline Give Me a Break State of the Art.
Did you see that? Is something missing? You see it now, right?
Much more aggressive Syracuse 2-3 zone the last couple of minutes.
No, you're not going mad. You're watching an ad campaign for March Madness, the men's NCAA basketball tournament developed by BBDO to sell DirecTV's March Madness packet.
Just another example of how DirecTV is rethinking the way television should be.
The point of the commercial is to communicate that without Mega March Madness from DirecTV, you're not getting the entire tournament.
Tom Chrisman and Rick Ardito of the ad agency were shooting from outside the arc as they came up with the idea.
We said, how would this look if we removed the ball? And we wound up getting to a point where we said, what if we removed the basket and the backboard? And we thought, well, let's go one step further. Let's remove the offense and just have the defense sitting there, blocking an opponent that's not there.
The campaign? One spot without the ball, the second without the basket, the third without the other team. No easy layout.
A lot of the people that see commercials these days have become pretty savvy, and they can tell the difference between something that's good or something that's bad and falls flat.
The only way to make sure the spots didn't fall flat, the ad men decided, was to use actual game footage, not actors, and remove certain items from each shot. To do this, they hired a company called Charlex. And while you may not be familiar with the name, you've certainly seen Charlex's work. They put a band in a cell phone, made M&M's dance,
two of the biggest players in the game,
and melded Randy Johnson and Roger Clemens into one pitcher.
Well, again, if you could make it so that...
Alex Weil, creative director, CEO, and founder of Charlex, says erasing images from video is a lot harder than it looks.
Basically, this is a job where you remove things. Okay? Now, the problem when you remove things from a picture is that you have to put something where the thing was.
In other words, if there's a ball in the shot and you take it out, there's a hole in the picture. So using technology along the same lines as that used in the Tomahawk missile system, digital artists like Kevin Quinlan went to work.
And we realized that we would have to basically remove everyone and then bring back what we wanted. Now, as you'll notice in the real shot, when he's by himself, that's not a big deal. We can get rid of everyone else and bring him back clean. The difficulty lies when he goes behind someone and he's being blocked. We had to go in and create a jersey and legs and shorts and feet that actually matched up to what the player was really doing.
The artist had to repeat this process for every single frame of footage in each of the 3 commercials.
So on this shot, when the ball comes over the player's chest, we had to create what his jersey should look like. So we're taking still frames and we're bending each one, lighting each one, and animating it so it looks like his actual jersey.
This was fun because the work is very evident, and even people in the business started to go, what? So we like that.
Johnson and Ojai It was, as they say, a slam dunk.
If you can do a commercial that people laugh at, that's great. But if you can do a commercial that people actually talk about and tell their friends about, or stop the TiVo and call their wife into the room and say, you got to see this, then that's even better.
And it can be better once you saw it, you're mad about March Madness. That's all for this edition of Give Me a Break Saturday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Monday. For all of us here at YouTube and Give Me a Break, stop bullying, speak up. Concentration, not strength. No jaywalking. Good night.